What did you want to be when you grew up?
I guess like lots of people, I wanted to be different things at different times. There was a time when I desperately wanted to be in the army. I think growing up, I just liked playing with Action Man. I liked fighting. There was a time, I think quite a brief moment in time when I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. Definitely grew out of that. And I think there was quite a long period where I wanted to be a journalist. And I am kind of a journalist, but only kind of. So there you go, that's a dream of sorts realised.
Leeds, 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 what is happening? Welcome to Working Hours, a show about a place called Leeds, a time called now, and an activity called work. My name is Simon, and this is all my fault. You're listening to episode 26 and my guest, Ed Carlisle. This is another Zoom interview recorded 19th of October 2021. Ed Carlisle is a community activist who co-leads on various projects including the Big Bike Fix, Leeds Repair Cafe, South Leeds Life newspaper, Beeston Festival, the Space Youth Programme and the Holbeck Viaduct project. Ed lives in Beeston with his wife and 2 kids and is the lead candidate for the Green Party in South and Central Leeds. I have included links for those projects in the show notes. I'm not going to waffle here today, but there might be more waffle on Monday's episode. Let's get into this.
So what is it that you are doing now then?
So I do many things. So I live down in South Leeds and Beeston with my family. I have a very scattered work life. The theme is very much around community development work, but it features lots of things and it evolves and changes over time. So so some of the things I do. So I help to coordinate a bike fixing project where we take in lots and lots of unwanted bikes because lots of people have bikes gathering dust in their garages or basements, and we fix them up and then give them out to local people in the community who want to get into cycling. I help to run South Leeds Life newspaper. I don't do the bulk of the work. There's a guy called Jeremy who's the editor who is the mainstay, but I'm on the board for that and I write for it. I help to run Beeston Festival. I do a little bit of youth work and coordinate a programme of youth clubs and youth events called Space. I could go on. Should I go on?
Well, I mean, how many of these, so my first question is, how many of these roles are sort of employment? How many are they through, like, are you self-employed? Have you had to set up a company to do all of these and then pay yourself through that? Like, how do you work it?
Yeah, so the bulk of my employment over the last, pretty much my whole working career, the last 15, 20 years has been self-employed. So actually something I was doing for many years and now am very much on the periphery of by choice. So there's a small citywide charity, Leeds-wide charity called Together for Peace. And I was involved from the early days onwards in the early 2000s, and that we do community development work, creative community development work around the city. So for many years I co-ran that. And it was self-employed work, but it was at times pretty much full-time. So that's kind of set the tone for my career. And then to this day, a lot of my work continues to be the paid work I get is self-employed. So the Big Bike Fix project, we've been given a bit of funding for that, and there's a local charity who have kindly agreed to hold, I suppose, be our legal body and to be our financial administrative body, because the project basically fits within their charitable aims, so it kind of fits as one of their projects, and then I invoice them. And then some of the other projects I do sometimes afford me small bits of money. The youth work is paid. It's via the Salvation Army. They very kindly employ me part-time and have done over many years. And quite a lot of it is not paid.
How did you get into it? Did you come through a route of, like, what was your first job? Did you go into work and then you were like, I don't like this, I want to be doing something else? Like, what brought you to this kind of work?
Yeah, so it wasn't a strategy I set out to achieve. yeah, like many people, came to Leeds to study, came in the 90s, fell in love with the city, decided to stay on. And then, yeah, in the early 2000s, moved down to Beeston, South Leeds. And I think this is a key part of the story, which is that I then found myself living very, very cheaply. Like, I was in a shared house with some people. We were paying 19 quid a week rent, and
Nice.
some people had very kindly nicked and written off my car, so I didn't have a car anymore. So that wasn't an expense I had anymore. And I was doing lots of I started doing community volunteering stuff, and some of it was I was doing the turnstiles at Elland Road a bit, and just doing small bits of, yeah, just casual bits of work, and found that then I was able to live pretty cheaply. And that wouldn't have been sustainable for the whole of my life. I don't think it was certainly sustainable for that time. And it just meant that I had quite a lot of freedom and autonomy to do the things I wanted to do and develop the work and the work patterns that I wanted to develop. I got some part-time mentoring work at what was then Park Lane College, which is now part of City College. So that was, but again, that kind of fitted within the rest of what I was already doing. That was working with refugees and people seeking asylum. And then soon after that, started off as a volunteering thing with this organisation called Together for Peace, which at the time was new, then became a somewhat paid job. Like, it was, in the early days, it was very lightly paid, but we developed credibility, we developed momentum, and we became a better funded organisation than ever. I'm sure I was working below the minimum wage kind of, throughout my time there, but yeah, putting in lots of hours, but getting a reasonable part-time salary, and then just continuing to live on the cheap, really. Here in South Leeds, and yeah, just being a bit of a skinflint, really, and just not buying too much stuff, but yeah, quite happy with that. And but anyway, it just affords you a lot more autonomy and freedom to make decisions about what you want to do.
So has that been the key then? Is that being what has allowed you the flexibility, basically keeping your expenses really low so that any money that comes in will cover those expenses? Is that how you try to work it?
I guess it's worth talking about privilege as well. So I had the opportunity to buy what was then a cheap house in Meanwood in the 90s. Yeah, don't mind giving you the figures. The house was about 40 grand. So I bought that, and then by the time I sold it, it tripled in value, which then enabled me to buy a house outright without mortgage here in Beeston. And living without a mortgage or living without rent is a privilege. So that's part of the story as well. But yeah, I think, I think it's worth having. I was talking to some students recently about this. Like, I think it's really worth getting to grips with the idea that if you can reduce your outgoings without making yourself miserable, then you can. It is still, even in this day and age, still possible to live reasonably frugally and still be happy. And yeah, and then just not be so much on the conveyor belt of just needing to just earn and earn and earn just to keep yourself afloat, which I appreciate lots of people are in. And it's, yeah, as I said, I think privilege is part of it, and not having rent or a mortgage is definitely been a key thing for me. But nonetheless, I think any of us can kind of find ways of building autonomy into our economies.
So, I mean, what takes up the most of your time? Is most of your time taken up with the voluntary activities, the unpaid work, or is most of your time taken up with, funding applications to try and fund the work that you do? Or is it just a balance of everything? And on top of that, I want to sort of get you to touch on kind of work-life balance, and do you think you've got that work-life balance now then?
Okay, so what do I spend most of my time doing? I don't spend a lot of time writing funding applications. I should probably do more of that. And I'm sometimes a little bit lazy and a little bit lucky, I guess. Not outrageously lucky, but just a bit lucky that things like the bike fix project kind of certainly has kind of hit, I don't know, it's hit a whole load of targets and ticked lots of people's boxes. So like we've not been given loads and loads of money, we've just been given modest amounts of money from a couple of different funders. And also there's a bit of a social enterprise element to it as well, where we sell about 1% of the bikes we get donated and then make good money. But yeah, that money, the money kind of gets dished out amongst the team, and I have to buy lots of spare parts and blah blah blah. So, but anyway, so I don't write lots of funding bids, but should or could possibly do more of that. So, I mean, if I'm honest, at the moment, I go through phases. Sometimes I end up doing a bit more paid work than at other times. At the moment, I'm just doing. It's just a real mix day by day. But yeah, doing quite a bit of stuff for South Leeds Life at the moment, newspaper and news blog, and then like another thing that's definitely not paid is, so I'm involved in local politics and local campaigning as well. So alongside the project, also just I'm in contact with a lot of people about I don't know, and social behaviour and issues with housing and bins not being emptied and a whole load of other stuff. And I suppose just doing the work that I think the councillors might be doing more of, but they're not. So doing that, and then alongside that, then standing the elections and doing year-round campaigning work, I suppose, for want of a better word. And so just try to weave that through everything else I'm doing, whilst also not wanting to politicise and everything I do either, and not wanting to create contradictions and tensions there. So yeah, in short, in answer to your question, so the majority of the stuff I do at the moment is unpaid, but by hours, but then I get just about enough salary incoming to make it work. My wife also works part-time, so that together it makes just about enough of an income for us to get by. And do I have a work-life balance? Probably not. I do, like lots of people, I suppose, working with flexible work. I guess my work feels more like a lifestyle than a job. So do quite long hours on it, and I think the key thing is, like, I try to spend good quality time with my family, particularly on the 3 o'clock till 7 or 8 o'clock slot, after school and weekends and whatever, and try to be a reasonably attentive dad and husband, but also work a lot on evenings after the kids are in bed, do lots of Zooms, and sometimes stay up till the middle of the night just catching up on all the unanswered emails and all that kind of stuff. And I think actually then one other thing, again, sometimes this works, sometimes it doesn't, but I try to weave my kids and family, kids particularly, into the community stuff. So take them on litter picks, and they come to the bike fix project when I go there and help me give out bikes to people and all that kind of stuff, which I think doesn't totally do their head in. I guess time will tell when they're when they're 30 and they hate me.
So how did this all come about? Was there a plan here, or was it just kind of happened?
Okay, so it's not, I definitely didn't have a master plan that I've followed, that I've stuck to. I think I think there's a really good book that I need to reread. I haven't read it for years, called Leadership in the New Science by a writer called Margaret Wheatley, and it looks at new science, also known as quantum science, and what we can learn about it and how we can apply that to our lives. And she would say that the very mechanized ways of the way we organize society, the way we organize ourselves, are just really dysfunctional, and that we can find other ways to manage ourselves and manage our lives. And she would say, like, finding purpose is a really key way of kind of creating a path for yourself. So and purpose is key, and you have to keep working at purpose. And even if you're not deliberately doing it, it's there for all of us. Like, what is life, and what's the meaning of life, and what are we doing? and I think it's important to give it some attention and try to make it conscious when we can. I think if you spent your whole life working about trying to work out what your purpose is, I think that could be unhelpful as well. I think it could become so-called navel gazing. But so I think yeah, there's definitely something about purpose. I suppose as I was coming out of my studies in the early 2000s, I definitely had a sense of purpose, even if it was all quite unformed, which was I want to stay around in Leeds. I want to continue to invest myself in the life of Leeds. I want to get involved in Leeds. I want to serve. I want to be part of stuff. I want to be part of cool stuff. I want to be part of interesting creative work. And I think at that time, I think at that time I could have imagined myself going into any number of routes. I think I could have become a civil servant. I think I could have ended up working for like a big charity, doing kind of program delivery within a big charity. Like, I guess, yeah. And I mean, and then the other thing is some of the best kind of campaigners and community activists I know, that they have work, often part-time work, that pays their way, and then doesn't necessarily link with their activism and campaigning work, and they do that and it pays the bills, and they give I don't know, 10 hours, 20 hours a week to the stuff that really sets them on fire. So anyway, so yeah, that's where I started going with it, and I guess it's just evolved over time. And yeah, so the organisation Together for Peace that I co-ran for many years, that was a key part of my journey, and I think the fact that it was, I mean, the organisation very much it endures and it's ongoing. As I said, I'm by choice, I'm somewhat on the periphery of it now, but I think the fact that I was a part of it, and it was a big part of me for a decade, really, or well over a decade, and there was a reasonable level of financial security within there. It was a reasonable part-time salary. That meant that I was just able to, I suppose, learn about what I was about and what I was doing, and it gave me some financial security as I did that. And yeah, the longer you do this work, in many ways, the easier it becomes, because you have a thicker and thicker web of relationships, and more and more people kind of know and trust you and are willing to lend you stuff, and we've had more and more conversations with people, and then you're able to innovate and make good things happen. I think a key part of this is possibly too much of a tangent for you, but I think a key part of what I'm about is wanting to catalyze things that I then don't hold, but maybe kind of remain part of if that's useful. Although in some cases, actually kind of catalyzing something and handing it over to others and stepping away and letting them do it. That's been the case with a few projects I've been part of, but kind of catalyzing things and holding something for a period of time, or possibly holding it for a long period of time, but then just bringing others in, so then it doesn't then all fall on me. So there's things like the Repair Cafe or the Holbeck Viaduct projects, and I am by no means running that. If anything, I'm kind of somewhat in the back seat of it, in a way that I entirely welcome, because other great people have come forward and are co-leading it with me, and probably doing a better job of co-leading it than me. And yeah,
you must have heard people talking about, working on a project. If you're not working on your own project, you're working on someone else's project. But as you've just said there, you like to sort of catalyze things and hand it over to other people. I mean, do you feel that that's working on your own project? Do you feel like that is what your project is, that you're like, I can get this done for you?
I guess in some respects it's nice actually. So I have a good window from my office that looks out across the city, so I can see the city before me. And I guess I kind of see Leeds as my project, really. And I love Leeds, and committed to Leeds, and love being part of Leeds, and love being woven into the mix of Leeds and making good things happen here, always alongside others, because it's dull working on your own. And yeah, just being part of good stuff. And there's something as well, it's about, going back to the whole idea of just reflecting about what you're about and why you do what you do. And I think that's maybe I didn't quite state this strongly enough. I think everyone everywhere should be working hard at trying to work out what their purpose is, and why they do what they do, and what drives them and what motivates them. So just think it will. Yeah, I think the more of us who have a strong sense of purpose, the better. And there are really good kind of social and philosophical and theological narratives that can really nurture us and sustain us and mean we don't get burnt out and give us creativity and give us good gifts. But equally, sometimes our narratives can hold us back as well. Anyway, so that's kind of the why. But I think also just kind of learning what you're about and what you do well. And I think from experience, I think I'm someone who is quite good at just sometimes patiently so, but just pushing a project forward over time and gathering people to that thing and putting the jigsaw together of kind of people and ideas and resources, and then in many cases then just stepping back or somewhat stepping back. And there are people who are much better than me at any number of things like fundraising or administration or I don't know, just there's lots of very gifted people out there. So it's just about trying to find those people and helping them get stuck together and then making these good things emerge. So I guess that's so you learn your craft, and you learn, and it's good and right that we all improve our skills and get better at especially things we're not by default good at. So I'm much better administrator than I was 15 years ago. And but there's something also just about learning what you're good at and then working that groove.
So would you say you're like, are you the one that kind of comes up with the ideas, or are you more of a realizer? Like, do you sort of make people's ideas happen, or do you generate the ideas yourself as well?
Well, a bit like they say, Shakespeare didn't come up with a single original idea, or certainly not an original narrative. Again, I guess thinking about some of the things I'm part of. So the bike fix projects, people have been fixing up old bikes for a very long time. There's some great organisations and in Leeds who do quite similar to what we're doing. We're doing it in a slightly more localised way. But they've ploughed that furrow in many ways. We're mimicking them and kind of watching and learning how they've made it happen. The Repair Cafe project, like, we didn't come up with the idea of Repair Cafe. It's been happening for 15 years or so, but this conversation was happening in the city. Me and others were saying, we should create a Repair Cafe in Leeds, and the stars weren't quite aligning and people were too busy to make it happen. So we just sometimes you just kind of sit on the project and wait for it, and then a moment arrives and someone has capacity and you hold an event and people come to it, and then you kind of, it's not that your work is done, but then you kind of roll it forward a bit and a project emerges. And I think there's something as well, just thinking about Repair Cafe as well, there's something about remaining part of something, as long as you're useful, as long as you're not a hindrance, staying part of something and helping, like any organisation. So there's two projects I'm part of that are just somewhat just hit rocky ground at the moment, like nothing drastically terrible, but just the complexity and chaos of life has kind of hit a bit. So then there's something about just helping to steady the ship and quite possibly getting new people in and just helping to kind of steady the ship and drive things forward. I mean, another project was the Holbeck Viaduct project, which I'm working on with others. Again, people have been talking about opening up that viaduct for decades, so it's definitely not our idea, but there's something about just being the person or the people who coalesce people around the idea and patiently drive it forward.
Keep asking what's happening with this, what's going on.
So, and I think there is something, I mean, it's funny, sometimes people ask me, so the Holbeck Viaduct project our iteration of the Holbeck Viaduct project has been running for about 10 years, since a bunch of us sat down in one of the pubs in Holbeck Urban Village and had a drink and said we should do something. And it's been somewhat slow going. We've now become an incorporated body, and we're forming a board and talking to Network Rail and so on. But it's been a slow old go. And people sometimes say to me, "Oh, is that not just really frustrating?" I was like, you know what? There's enough projects happening at a fast pace in my life. I'm quite happy to just kind of not quite sit on it, but just hold it lightly and just try to gently kind of push it forward, and in the recognition that it might never happen. It's a huge infrastructural project. Creating a bike fixing project is one thing, but opening up a Victorian rail viaduct to the public and probably needing several £1 million to do so is a different category.
But then there's a lot of work going on in the South Bank and so on, which, that kind of development is naturally going to overspill into areas like Holbeck. So there becomes more reasons to potentially spend that money.
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of reasons to open up Holbeck Viaduct. There's, I mean, it's quite a nice project to be part of because it's essentially not controversial. Everyone loves it. Everyone loves Holbeck Viaduct. What's not to love? And again, it's got every reason. So it goes through what I don't know if it's still called Holbeck Urban Village, but I call it Holbeck Urban Village. So it kind of goes through Holbeck Urban Village, through behind Temple Works, Temple Mill, through all the big South Bank developments there, CEG, etc. And then it goes, snakes its way around the back of Old Chapel Studios and past established Holbeck, Old Holbeck, and then up towards Elland Road Football Stadium. So it's perfect. It can serve a very useful purpose for that corner of the city, and I think it could just be a really good, positive, iconic thing for the city anyway. But yeah, lining up the pieces or putting the jigsaw together for Holbeck Viaduct is just, it's in a whole different category than getting some old bikes, getting a space, getting some people who like fixing bikes. That's a piece of cake, really.
Okay, so I'm going to go, before we go into the more like downer questions, I'm going to do a sort of idealistic one. So if you could, as Jane McAlevey would put it, if you could change 3 things about your work today, what would you change? So you can change anything to have it better. What would you change?
What would I change? So I mean, on the one hand, I'm pretty happy with my work. So I'm not itching to change lots. And I guess I will answer your question, but I guess I have a reasonable amount of autonomy to change my work as I wish anyway. So I like to think I would change the things that I want to change. I think one thing that I think about in the back of my mind a lot is just the psychology of work, and just the psychology of our work practices and the emotional, things that we all get caught up in. So, I don't think I'm totally alone in this. To be fair, I don't think everyone does it, but I think a fairly wide range of it. I've got emails sat in my inbox that I haven't opened, so I just don't have the emotional energy to open them. And I will open them, and I won't make, because you have to open them, because you have to respond. And I think there's something about, because my life is such a jumble of different things, I think it then just creates, that kind of creates more emotional and psychological barriers. I think if you're working on a single thing, then I think it does become easier. And I can recognize that myself. Like sometimes if a given project is coming, like a big event is coming, then by necessity, you just put everything else to one side and you just focus on that thing. And you just work a lot more effectively. You're focused and you have to focus. So I think just psychologically, I like to think that I will continue to evolve and get better at just being a bit more rigorous, a bit more organized, just opening up my inbox, not being afraid of emails, just open them one by one, respond to them one by one, and almost not let yourself be dictated by the emotional or psychological barriers or something. And I also think that somewhat related to that, I don't know if this counts, I think it's probably still the first thing I'd change. Like, when you get your head sorted as to, even if it's a wide range of projects and a wide range of things, if you kind of get yourself sorted and get your head into gear and know what you're about on a given day, then you just work about 2 or 3 times more effectively than if you're still trying to, what do I need to do today? What's the priority? And you muddle around and you do different things. And every so often you'll have one of those days where you're just on it. And it's like, I wish every day could be like this, because you just get a lot done, and that's good. So that's one thing I'd change. I think I would like to, although I do collaborate with everyone, or just not everyone, with a lot of people on all these projects, I think I would like to collaborate more closely with, I think I'd like to be part of a small team in some respects.
Yeah.
So it wasn't always easy, but when I co-ran Together for Peace, it was essentially me and 2 mates co-ran it over about 15 years together. And we were different, and we had our differences, and it wasn't always easy. But I also think there's something really good about working in a team, and because you have your different strengths. So I think I would benefit from working more closely with somebody, particularly somebody who I think brings a bit more rigor and order. I think I wouldn't say I'm a chaotic worker, but if there's a spectrum from really bad chaos over here to really kind of bureaucracy and really over organized and deathly control, I'd say I'm probably 55% towards the kind of the
chaos end.
And actually on this, a second plug for Leadership in a New Science book. She talks about needing to balance chaos and order, and hold balance chaos and order in tension to find the sweet spot within work. So without order, nothing gets done. But without chaos, like allegedly in the Greek, the Greek etymology of the word chaos, they don't have that negative sense of chaos is bad. Chaos is about spontaneity, about the unpredictable, about being open to new opportunities. So there's definitely goodness within the chaos, but without the order, it becomes hopeless as well. So that's two things. Yeah, go on.
That's why you live in a city. You live there for the chaos of bumping into people and making new connections and so on. That's why we're here ultimately, isn't it?
Okay, third thing I changed. So I'd love to have a fully electric van that I can just drive around, because I'm forever ferrying stuff around like that, kind of just woven into my life. I'm just always picking up unwanted bikes or getting washing machines, like, so that people don't want and somebody else wants it. Because so here in South Leeds, a lot of people, particularly, I mean, it's true everywhere, but in South Leeds, there's lots of people who don't have vehicles, don't have transport, don't have money to pay for transport. And so something I've ended up doing a lot in the last few years as well is just shuffling furniture around. And people are a bit like, really? You spend lots of time doing that? But it's not a huge effort, really, and it seems to make quite a big impact. So you'll have people who move into their flats and just have nothing, and other people who are desperate to get rid of their 3-piece suite. So you end up just shuffling stuff around, and everyone ends up happy. So my poor car is ready to die at some point soon. So a fully electric, amazing, all singing, all dancing van would be lovely.
Yeah.
There you go. 3 things.
Okay, so we'll go into, I'm sure there are other questions that I wanted to ask you, but we'll just sort of crack on with. So we'll cover a bit of COVID. How did the lockdowns affect you? And were you able to work at all, or were you doing even more and more volunteering? How did that go for you?
I know people who really, really struggle with the pandemic and with lockdown, particularly people who were already alone, or especially people who were already isolated. It just exacerbated that in really bad ways. So I'm definitely in no way diminishing that, because I've seen it firsthand. For myself, I felt in my own life, there were lots of positives with lockdown, and just the way that the pause button was pressed and lots of things stopped. And as a family, we didn't totally love homeschooling, I have to say. That was pretty patchy, but we muddled through and got there. But on the whole, I thought there were lots of positives, and there were quite a few things that I was part of that just, there were lots of things that just got stopped. So Beeston Festival is a big part of what I do, and that stopped. The youth program we did that stopped to an extent, although we stayed in touch with kids by other means, but we weren't running a youth program and doing trips with them and lots of stuff. South Leeds Life somewhat stopped. We stopped doing newspapers, I think, for a few months, as far as I remember. So anyway, so lots of things stopped, and I quite enjoyed it. But but I ended up it's probably just a bit predictable, really, but I ended up being somewhat busy just doing different stuff. So yeah, a mate of mine and I ended up getting loads of PPE, personal protective equipment, and kind of getting it into care homes and frontline workers and that kind of stuff. And again, it was an interesting example of just being the mediator. So we were aware that there were a whole load of people who were making PPE because they wanted to do something, but then in some cases, because they weren't friends with the Conservative government, they didn't necessarily then have outlets for that stuff, and they weren't looking to sell it. They just wanted it to they wanted to play their part and be useful. And then we were aware, of a whole load of people, particularly care workers and other frontline workers who didn't have the PPE they needed. So then just kind of helping to make that connection. So we did quite a lot of that. Did a lot of food deliveries, particularly junk food via the Real Junk Food Project, and other schemes like it. Just kind of getting food to where it needed to go. And the digital access stuff. So that was families in particular, some families just not having laptops or tablets, and so therefore struggling to engage with schoolwork. So some great people set up these digital access schemes to get unwanted laptops and tablets and get them serviced and cleaned up and wiped clean and then into the community. Again, that wasn't my project, but again, just playing a small part in just helping to put the jigsaw together. So that was some of what I did. And I mean, like another feature from last year, and again, it wasn't my project, but just helped some other people. There was the Buy Leeds campaign around encouraging people to buy from independent and local businesses. So in the lead up to Christmas, just again played a part in just helping to build that campaign. And I guess one thing, I don't know, so because of being in South Leeds, in Beeston and thereabouts for the whole of my working career, I struggle to always get perspective, but my sense is, and lots of people agree with me, that South Leeds is less connected with the rest of the city than other parts of the inner city. I think when you're talking about your Morleys and your Pudseys and your Guyses, I think, or Ockleys, they're different again, because they are somewhat their own,
like satellite
communities. But I think like within the city, South Leeds, LS10 and LS11 are somewhat disconnected. And so I think sometimes it's just about trying to bridge that gap into the city, which I feel well connected with, into and out of my community.
So I don't know which way to go around, but I think we'll start with climate change, given that you're a Green Party candidate. So what's your feeling as we move further into climate change? I mean, how do you see your work changing, being affected? Do you see it becoming more and more of a necessity? Do you think what you're doing is going to be more what everybody's going to be doing, or like what's your feeling on it? What's your sense? How much do you think it's going to affect your work?
So
it's a bit of a stupid question, I know, but I mean, the way that I've formulated it in terms of how is it going to affect your work, because obviously there's going to be large scale effects across the board. But
I think it's a great question. I just think everyone should be considering what climate change is, what impact it's going to have on their lives, because we're not going to be able to continue business as usual. And I think it's great that people are engaging with the reality of climate change. I think there's still a huge leap for all of us as to working out how we can meaningfully respond to it, other than, you know, maybe just cutting out plastic from our lives or reusing plastic bags or whatever. Like, I think a wide range of us need to be, actually all of us just need to be getting to grips with how we can enable our communities and cities and everything to just, to make that quantum leap, to engage with it and engage with it well. I guess I'm somewhat of an optimist about life in general, but I do also think we have to get real about the fact that we're not going to avoid. I can't see how we can meaningfully decarbonize our society, and societies across the world can't meaningfully decarbonize societies to the point where we dodge the bullet and avoid it. I think it's possible. Some of the technologies, like if carbon capture comes on stream, and it's maybe just possible that could really kind of take off some of the hard edges of what climate change might mean for us, all of us. But essentially, climate change is coming; it's going to have a big impact, and so therefore, I think we have to put as much emphasis on building resilience into our communities and our society as actually trying to stop climate change. We do need to stop climate change. We need to try to decarbonize the society, so the world, so that we enable ourselves as the world to avoid the worst excesses of what climate change can be. But I also think that, we need to work hard at resilience. So that's broadly what I'm doing. So I don't spend that much time relatively kind of trying to work out how we can have a low carbon society, really. Like if I was, then I might have created a community wind farm by now, or I might have done lots of kind of that kind of stuff. I do bits of that, and actually I could talk to you about a housing thing that I'm a little bit part of. But on the whole, what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to build resilience into my community. So there's a really good movement called Transition Towns. At the beginning, they wrote a handbook called the Transition Towns Handbook. And at the beginning of that, the writer, a guy called Rob Hopkins, he says, in this book, we're going to talk about lots of things. We're going to talk about how you can basically build a low carbon community. And we're going to talk about lots and lots of tech and things like that. He said, but the good news is, we can all start responding to climate change right away. Like, even if you can't imagine what it would look like to build a wind farm in your community, or even kind of insulate your own house, which is the biggest job. So the thing that we can all start doing right now is just talk to one another, just build connections, build connectivity, build trust and social warmth in your community. Because then whatever happens in the future, your community will be that much better placed to respond to the crises ahead. So I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to work across South Leeds, work across Leeds, to build that resilience, build that sense of creative, collaborative community work, trying to get people to just see that they can work together and make a difference, make good things happen in their community, reduce waste, improve that whole thing about reuse, and just wanting to almost sow the seeds or get thin end of the wedge stuff on starting to work out what it could look like in a somewhat kind of post-crisis society. So let's assume there is going to be a climate crisis. Let's try to work out what we can do now to sow the seeds for building a somewhat generative community or city beyond that, as opposed to it all just getting like Mad Max and everyone just killing one another. And there is, there's another thing that it's a small bit of what I do, but I'd like it to become a bigger part, which is about community growing. There's incredible edible is happening. There's some great people across Leeds and across the UK doing that, and I think that's again a simple thing that all of us can do, which is just thin end of the wedge, just start growing stuff in our communities, so we can then hopefully build on that in the coming years and not all starve to death.
So are we, given your COVID-19 experience and the experience with the lockdowns, are we resilient? Like, is it there? Did we handle that well? And can we handle the next thing well, given what that experience was like?
I think there is some resilience.
Mm.
I think there could be a lot more. I think there's just a lot of, I mean, it's all stuff that is, I think, very obvious. But yeah, in many ways we live in a atomized society where people are somewhat disconnected from one another. But equally, no, there is some really good community connectivity, community spirit in. I think some communities more than others. Actually, I think it's a bit of a magical, mysterious thing, but some communities have more community spirit than others, and I think there is more resilience there than others. I mean, here in Beeston, a fairly major part of the history of our community was in 2005 when there was the London bombs, and the world media descended on our doorsteps here in Beeston because 3 of the perpetrators of that either were from or had a close connection with Beeston, so the world media turned up. And I think there were a lot of concerns at that time that Beeston would just fall apart and there'd be race riots and it would be awful. And I think it was pretty telling that the community, for all its faults, and there's lots of problems in Beeston, did hold together and stick together. And I think whatever any of us can do to kind of build that community collaboration and build that community spirit in wherever anyone is valuable. And one thing I would say about that is it's nice knowing people and talking to people and talking to your neighbours. That kind of stuff is nice, but there's nothing really like it other than the best thing is actually to build collaboration. So building like community is okay, but building collaboration is better because the relationships and the links forged when you do stuff with people, when you're interdependent with people because you're fixing bikes together or gardening together or whatever, makes for much stronger links.
Just a quick aside here. So on the, you're writing for South Leeds Life, you're doing a little bit of journalism there. So you're doing a little bit of media work. Do you see that as part of your activism as well? Do you see that as, do you see yourself as kind of a bit of alternative media? Or are you able to talk about what you want to talk about in that? Or is it mainly just copy for, for adverts, for an advertising magazine sort of thing?
No, I mean, I think South Leeds Life is a great model. I think we've stumbled on something pretty good. It's worth mentioning as well, there's over in West Leeds, there's West Leeds Dispatch, which we see very much as our sister publication. They're also great people. And last time I checked, there's some people in East Leeds who are looking, I don't know quite where in East Leeds, I don't know what their geographical boundaries are, but anyway, there's some people in East Leeds also looking to do something similar. And I think I think South Leeds Life is, we're not slaves to the advertisers. We've got just the funding model we've got means that we're pretty autonomous really, which is great. I think we owe a great debt of gratitude to this guy Jeremy, who's kind of been the engine within South Leeds Life over many years. And I think without him and the role he's played, I think we'd be less autonomous. I think he works for, you should probably have this conversation with him, but he works for a pittance really and puts in the hours and helps to create this really not quite unique but certainly very special community resource. And I see it very much linked. It's not aside from my community work. It's kind of it's very much part of that.
Embedded,
I'm not quite sure I'm not sure I'd necessarily put it within an activism bubble. I mean, it's interesting. Like I do at times definitely consider myself to be an activist. But then you can have interesting debates about, like, is a community activist different to an activist? And obviously we're just talking language here, but I think
there's an employee, an activist for the company that they work for,
Really? Yeah.
I mean, you're given a line to follow. Here's the party line. Here's what we believe as an organisation. Here's what we do. Go and do it. We pay you to do this. So in a way, that's, you know, you're acting that lifestyle out. So that's activism to a degree, I suppose.
Yeah. So I think, I guess activism means a lot of
what you're doing, I suppose.
Say again, sir?
What you're doing, what you spend your time on, I think, to a degree.
No, definitely. No, I'm not, like, as I said, I'm very comfortable with the word activist, and I'm definitely at times an activist. I think with South Leeds Life, South Leeds Life isn't an activist publication, and there are activist publications out there, and we're not it. We aim to be a community newspaper stroke news site, and there are definitely articles we run which are somewhat more activisty, and I think there's definitely something about community advocacy and giving a voice to people, and wanting, like, we did a big feature in the last few weeks that I was involved with. It was a conflict between some developers and who were doing a big development, and the local community, and the local community feeling like the developers were being irresponsible and antisocial. The developers saying, well, hold on, we're doing a big development, of course there's some disruption, we're sorry there's some disruption, but there's always going to be disruption. But it was about kind of giving voice to those residents and giving them the opportunity to I suppose to say their piece. And that's as I said, and like, it's not that I was without empathy for the developers. I don't think the developers were kind of the bad guys, but I think there was something there about, I suppose, trying to shine a light and bring some accountability to that situation, which is, I think, a form of activism, and that's not uncommon. We try to do that kind of thing. We shine a light and try to bring some accountability, and also sometimes bringing some accountability to the council. So there's some great people within the council, and there's some great councillors, but I also think that sometimes the council can be a monolithic and somewhat unaccountable organisation doing what it wants to do to communities. And I think it's right and proper that publications like South Leeds Life play a part in wanting to just bring some accountability. And I mean, the media has a key part to play in democracy, as we all know. Just wanting to offer a different, speaking truth to power, all that kind of stuff. There you go.
But I suppose as well on the media, I mean, it's kind of banging on about this recently, but the sort of, they'll run all these stories about, like, oh, why does everyone hate each other so much, and why all this hate and stuff? And it's like, because of you. You read your newspapers.
Yeah.
So but they're always excised from the conversation, aren't they? It's always the public that are at fault, or somebody else. It's never them that's done anything wrong.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah, they don't act in the world.
No, they just report. No, I mean, it's an interesting one, actually. So this comes back to a conversation I had with somebody a couple of days ago. So within South Leeds Life, we try to be a nice newspaper. So we're not just about reporting all about the terrible things in South Leeds. We're trying to, we'll do a photo of some people who are just doing nice things in the community. But there's also a danger then that you, and we certainly, we definitely don't try to be antagonistic or whatever. But I think there's a danger then that if you go down that route, you kind of lose your bite, and there's important that the media has that role, which is challenging and holding to account. There are elements of the mainstream media that are just, as you've touched on, just completely mad and degenerative. But I think, we shouldn't aspire for the newspapers to just become tame either. They need to be places of vigorous debate and discussion. And I guess part of the issue is that they have become, I guess South Leeds Life we aim to be, and we are quite a crowdsourced newspaper, like quite a wide range of people write for us. And we regularly say to everyone in the local community, please write for us anytime you want. And I guess, the issue with the mainstream media to a large extent is, the narrative is carefully controlled, and it's not a crowdsourced model. It's
it's sort of what Eton thinks we all have to think.
Yeah.
Essentially. is Brexit going to affect your work? Has it affected your work? I would kind of imagine the answer is yes, and that you would be doing more work.
Because I'm so parochial and so local in my work, then it's not that it's not had an obvious direct impact. Like I do stuff in South Leeds, and South Leeds is still here, and South Leeds hasn't changed that much. I mean, I think there are definitely some fault lines. This isn't necessarily about Brexit, but there are some fault lines in our communities, as we all know, and there was a time when there was quite a lot of aggro, I think, really locally about should we be Brexiting or should we not, and that was that was both in the lead up to the vote and afterwards. So, and my main focus at that time, and it continues to be really, although not about Brexit so much, is wanting to just try to foster a culture within our communities where people can have good, honest debate about stuff and not feel they have to agree with everything, but at least just kind of have respectful dialogue around big issues, be it COVID and vaccines and Brexit and just who you vote for and all this kind of stuff. And I suppose coming back to climate change, I guess the danger is that if climate change and related issues to it, so the possibility of further financial crises, if that just applies more and more pressure onto our communities, the danger is that these fault lines become more and more toxic and dangerous. In times of, I suppose, plenty, people are less likely to really decide they hate one another because actually they're okay and they don't want to risk, they don't want to risk what they've got. But the danger is that actually, if people are that much more stretched and stressed, then the danger is that things become more toxic and more dangerous. I think, certainly, I guess it's hard to pull apart the impact locally of 11 years of austerity and cuts and Brexit and the impact of Brexit or not, and the impact of COVID or not. But certainly, kind of frontline resources, community resources have been much reduced, and that is meaning that some people are slipping through the nets. And like a classic one is mental health provision. There's just a lot of people with who struggle with poor mental health, and it feels like there's less and less for them. And I guess it just puts more and more emphasis on people who are doing community activism. And there are there are there's a wide range of really phenomenal people in South Leeds just making things happen. And many of them I don't think would even recognise themselves as activists, but they're just making good things happen in the community, which then can create avenues for people to connect with other people and just feel like they're part of the community, and then just be happier.
The work that you're doing, in a general job, a salaried job, you're producing, or you should be producing, more than you're being paid. That's the logic of the economics of it. So do you think you're able to leverage that from your sort of activism and volunteer work? Like, are you doing that at a really high level? Like, really, what you should be paying for, the amount of value that you're creating with what you're doing, should you be getting like thousands and thousands of pounds more because you're creating this value further down the line and within the city? Does that make sense? And do you have any, would you agree with that?
In an ideal world, I'd be getting well paid to do this work. And we've got to cling on to the possibility of creating better worlds. I'm also conscious that going right back to kind of the whole situation around privilege and getting to buy a house and selling it and then having a mortgage-free house. The current situation, the current economic reality we've got is that most people can't afford, or it's that much more of a struggle for them to afford to do what I'm doing. And actually, if we want to have communities where activism becomes easier Not to say it then becomes like it's not hard work, but it becomes a more feasible step for people to take. Then we need to change the economic, financial systems that we live in. And I think community activists can put a huge amount of value into their communities. And so therefore I want it to be as feasible as possible for people to do it. So I mean, there's we could get into kind of policy, but what can we do to maximize the possibility that people get paid a good salary or just a reasonable livable wage to make their community better? And let's just pursue that thread and make it happen.
So I know from previous manifestos of the Green Party that part of their offer is for a citizen's income. So I have a question on UBI, which is basically, I mean, like if we had UBI, it started tomorrow, you were getting like a decent amount. How much would that change your work? Would you just be working more, or would you work less, or would you not work at all? What would it change?
It wouldn't. I don't think it would. It wouldn't change me at all. It would just make my life more feasible. Like I don't think I could do more work.
But do you think more people could work with you potentially? Because
I think what would change is it would make activism that much more feasible. And whether people then would just, there's lots of people much cleverer and more better research than me, but whether lots of people then shift to part-time salaries or part-time work, and it would just create a lot more breathing space in society for collectively and for people everywhere. So I think it could potentially be a total game changer in the world of community activism, because it would just make it a lot more feasible. So I know some really great people who in South Leeds who are just, I think, have great potential to be those, whether or not it's even like a community activist setting up projects, but just people who would be actively looking out for people in the neighborhood and just kind of being those people who kind of weave other people together into stuff.
Isn't that just being a citizen as well, though, to a degree?
No, it is being a citizen, but I think that particularly in low income communities, I think a lot of those people who I'm thinking of are just very squeezed. They're having to work really, really hard just to kind of keep themselves afloat, keep their family afloat. There's just a lot of extra stress that wouldn't be there if we set up things differently. So I just think that UBI, universal basic income or citizens' income, would just create a lot of breathing space for those kind of people and enable more people to be better citizens. It would create a lot of, it would improve well-being for a wide range of people. People would just be less stressed, I think. I'm concerned, especially as we're looking ahead towards the prospect of various forms of climate crisis, that the stress and the stretch will only get worse. And I think history is fairly clear that at times of stress, individual or collective, there's just bad stuff happens. So scapegoating and like the whole road rage phenomenon, people just then are just carrying around loads of stress and anger and frustration that then gets vented. And I mean, I see, it's an interesting one. I guess I see plenty of people not holding back on social media. And funnily enough, I mean, there's a whole thing of people not holding back and then not holding back about the fact that it's terrible that there's no free speech anymore. And it's like, look at yourselves. You're saying exactly what you want all the time. I suppose I wonder, is there just a silent majority of people out there who are carrying the stuff around and not saying it, and therefore we're just not seeing it on social media? I think I would like, I would like social media to be, I'd like us all to embrace the possibility of social media around creating really good dialogue around big issues, and in a way that I don't think is really fully embraced. So I mean Facebook groups are interesting because you're on there, with thousands of people who you don't know, unlike if you're having a debate on your own Facebook wall. And I've been part of some phenomenal debates on local Facebook groups about refugees and people seeking asylum, about travellers, about just kind of fairly hot local topics. But I think and climate change as well, and I think I think social media can be an amazing platform for you to have quite a wide-ranging, difficult discussion. And let's work hard at not shying away from those difficult discussions, but let's have them. Let's if there are a whole load of people out there who feel like they can't share their views because it's I don't know, because they feel they'll be shouted down or whatever, then that's a shame, and it's a problem because it means that a whole load of people are carrying it around in them. And we need to try to create an environment where actually it's good to have discussions and debates and not feel like we're going to shoot one another down.
Do you do all your own kind of social posts, or do you is everything private, or do you have to post socially for work? I suppose because you're doing the copy for South Leeds Life, so you probably be quite used to producing content and advertising content online and marketing.
I mean, I'd love to have someone to do social media for me, but no, I do it all my own, all myself.
Is it time consuming, and does it?
Well, it's a funny one. So yes, it can be, but okay. So it's worth saying. So with South Leeds Life, so although I write articles for it, so Jeremy, our esteemed editor, he is the one who basically runs it, and he does the social media for us. And so I don't do South Leeds Life social media, but I do all the social media around all these different, or help with the social media around lots of the projects I'm part of. And I guess I struggle to keep up with it, to be honest. Like, there'll be days and days that go past and I'll be like, oh, like it'll be one of those emotional, psychological barrier things, like, oh, I need to go on Facebook and like I'm an extrovert, but I need to go on South Leeds Life and on Facebook and just engage with all these hundreds of notifications I've got, and people asking me stuff, and I've not done it for 3 days, and I suspect so and so is probably asking me about this, and and it's just like there's something about wanting to hold the balance between the real world and doing stuff in the real world and the importance of communication. Like it's easy for communication to be the first thing to drop. You kind of leave it because it's not quite immediate and tangible. But I think one of the things I'm passionate about is people, particularly community activists. Often community activists they'll get into what they're doing and they're great at it and they're passionate about the community and passionate about making stuff happen, but not necessarily, don't necessarily give communication, be it social media or forms of communication, the attention it needs. So there'll be really good stuff happening in local communities, and not enough people know that it's going on. So there's not enough people engaging with it. So then these things actually are not achieving their potential. And I also think, even if it's not necessarily about mobilizing more people towards this project, I also think the stories we tell are as important as the work we do, just in shaping our collective imagination. So I want people to be living in South Leeds to just have this sense that there are lots of good people in my community doing good stuff, making things happen, and that makes me feel good about the community I live in, and it makes me think maybe I could do that, as opposed to people hiding their bushels under bowls. If I've got that proverb right. So I think that kind of communication thing is really, really important.
I mean, to a degree, that's a large part of your work as well, isn't it? I mean, you're linking people up to other people, linking people up to information and ways of doing things, and getting washing machines to where they need to go.
But I tell you what, I think it's interesting as well. Like yeah, I think communication can be such an amazing tool, not just for the community debates, but I also just think for shining a light on stuff. So the Holbeck Viaduct project, we wouldn't be where we were without social media. But yeah, we use social media to, I suppose, if I'm broadly speaking, to talk ourselves up and talk, or not even talk ourselves up, but talk the viaduct up. So yeah, we have not really done work of substance on Holbeck Viaduct. Like, we've not done full surveys. We've not raised millions of pounds. There's lots we haven't done, but at the same time, lots of people take us seriously because our social media reach is good. There's another thing I'm part of called the Same Skies Collective, or possibly we are now the Same Skies think tank, and that's about campaigning around regional democracy. So
around what? Sorry,
regional democracy. So
right,
it's kind of like, again, we could get into great detail on this. It's basically linked to the whole devolution agenda, but we don't particularly use the word devolution. Devolution we see very much as a bureaucratic transaction between different elements of government, and it's fine, it serves its purpose, but we want to work hard at building regional democracy, which would be kind of the people coming up to meet devolution coming down. And yeah, I'll spare you the details of the ins and outs of regional democracy, but essentially, the Same Skies thing was, for a long time, it was just me and two mates basically kind of plugging away and doing it and holding events and doing some stuff on social media, and yeah, just a few little campaigns, always with others. There were always other people involved, but essentially just three of us at the core of it. And it's just quite interesting that a lot of people started taking us quite seriously, and I would say out of proportion to actually what we were substantially doing. And now, I'd say in the last year or two, we have hit a bit of a tipping point, and I'd say there is now a fair bit of substance to what we're about, and quite a load of new people got involved, and there's quite a lot of energy around it, and that, yeah, and that's good. You can't just keep hyping yourself ever without substance. But I think social media can help you to build profile and be taken seriously, and then that enables you to then hit tipping points and more people get involved and good things happen. There you go.
Okay, I have one final question for you. Are you ever going to retire? Or do you think you'll be doing this sort of?
I think I'll be doing this stuff for a very long time. I like to think that I will have the wisdom to slow down a bit as I get older, because otherwise I'll just burn myself out. And I think there's going to be some background noise, children here, and yeah, I mean, yeah, there are some old. So Emma,
hello.
I'll see you in a while. Yeah, I mean, there are some fantastic old activists I know who are being forced to slow down because physically that's what your body does to you. And I think I will hopefully be wise enough to do that. We'll see. Time will tell.
Time will tell. Thank you again to Ed for being my guest. Thanks again to all my guests, and thanks to you, Buggerlugs, for listening to this. Next time on Working Hours, I will be talking to someone else, not sure who yet. I am, but I'm not telling. Come back Monday to find out. Same Leeds channel, different hour, different day. So if you're listening to this, then I assume that you have some connection to Leeds, like living here or being from here. If you're that person in Leeds or from Leeds and you haven't done a record for this yet, send me a message now and let's record your Working Hours session. Email this podcast, workinghoursPod@western-studios.com, with a short bio and some suggestions of your availability, or just send me your feedback, questions, comments and queries. You can follow this show on Twitter @WorkingHours3 and on Instagram @WorkingHoursPodLeeds. I'm really interested to hear from anyone in Leeds or from Leeds in whatever industry, sector or role you are in. What is your experience? How do you feel about work? What do you like and not like? What do you do, Leeds? Please consider supporting this podcast further. I need champions for Working Hours, and that's exactly what you will be by giving me £1 a month via Patreon for this podcast. That's right, it's only £1 a month, allowing us to support and grow this project. Go to patreon.com/workinghourspod to sign up and offer regular support. Please remember to like, share, follow and subscribe to this show. Working Hours is presented, edited and recorded by Simon Treen for Western Studios Leeds Limited. The music was The Bees from Chopin's Etudes, which is in the public domain and was taken from museopen.org.